Hey everyone, and welcome to Method's Guide to the Urrak markets for Fellowship's early access release. My name is Tactyks, and in this video I'll be going over the most important trash mobs, an easy to execute starter route, as well as all of the boss encounters mechanics and how I recommend you deal with them. Do note that all the info in this video is based off the open beta, and it is possible that some things have changed since then. Also, if you're someone looking for more Fellowship Guide content, make sure you check out the Method YouTube channel, as we'll have videos covering all the dungeons and heroes out in the coming days. Let's hop right into this instance though, starting with the slave bind totems, which you'll find spread across the entire adventure. These are stationary mobs that don't actually attack themselves, but will reduce the primary stat of anyone near them by 20%. Usually there are also mobs nearby that prevent the totem from taking damage while they live, so I recommend tanking away from the totem initially to avoid that primary stat aura, and then swapping to it once the mobs protecting it have been defeated. That may sound like a bit of a time loss, but you do get some notable compensation, as on death these totems will buff all nearby players with Breaker of Chains, granting them increased cooldown reduction for 12 seconds. Moving on to mobs that actually fight back, Urrak's Slavers are near the start of the instance, and these guys just create an AoE around them in Bloodlash Wake, which you want to make sure you avoid or use a CC on to prevent the cast. Once you've pushed past Contender League and Vair's Legacy is active, they'll also gain the Barbed Chain ability, which links two random players together and deals damage to them reduced by their distance. So ideally, use an interrupt or CC to stop this cast, but if it does go off, just get close to your chain partner. Joining these slavers, we have the familiar man catchers, who will attempt to grip players more than 15 yards away, dealing damage and slowing them in the process. So ranged, make sure you stay close to the pack when these guys are involved. The most common mob in the adventure are probably the Outrunners, and these guys just have a random target hit in Bola Throw, which also has a hefty 40% slow attached to it, which can make dodging some of the other abilities a bit more difficult. When Vair's Legacy is active, they also gain the Charge ability, which they'll use if their target is out of range, making it difficult to kite these mobs or have non-tank players tag packs that include them, so be aware of that. Desecrators are another fairly common mob, and these guys will occasionally channel Volley, creating circles under random players for the entire duration that you just want to avoid, and if you have a spare CC, you can use it on them to stop this channel early. When Vair's Legacy is active, they also gain Infernal Explosive, which creates a soak circle nearby that one player will need to get into in order to prevent a moderate group hit. On the topic of group damage, Gore-Stained Butchers are a large source of it thanks to their Furious Tantrum channel. These mobs are CC immune, so you'll need to be ready with healing and group defensives when this goes off. They also have a Vair's Legacy ability, where this one is focused on tanks, as the Mince ability just channels damage into them specifically, so you want to have a personal running anytime this casts. Moving on to spellcasters, there are three main ones to be aware of. First up are the Horned Seers, where their important cast is Orb of Blood, which hits a random player and applies a magic debuff that actually increases damage done by 20%, so most of the time it's safe to let this cast go off and not dispel the debuff just for some bonus damage. That allows you to prioritize interrupting their Vair's Legacy ability Sanguine Offering, which shoots multiple of these blood orbs out over the duration of the channel. While you think you'd also want to let this go off, it shoots out too quickly and can easily burst a player down if you aren't careful or quick to react, so it's not worth the risk. From there, any spare interrupts can go into their Pain Bolt cast, which just gets spammed at the tank. The next caster are Hellcallers, and their important interrupt is Restore Vitality, so make sure that gets kicked or CC'd in order to prevent any healing. On top of that, you'll just need to watch out and be ready to dodge the circles that spawn when Armageddon is cast. Finally, when Vair's Legacy is active, they gain the random target Demonic Lash hit, another cast you ideally want to interrupt or use a CC on. The last spellcaster in the instance is the Urrak Witch, another mob with a spam cast tank hit, where this one is called Mossfire Bolt. Keep your spare interrupts on that, ensuring that you always have an interrupt or CC available for the Grasping Vines cast. If this goes off, it creates a slowing mass of vines underneath a random player, so you just need to make sure you move out of it and avoid that area. These casters become quite dangerous when Vair's Legacy is active, as they'll gain the Jungle Rot ability, applying a magic dot to the entire group for heavy damage. You want to be ready here with things like healing cooldowns or group defensives, plus it's a great spot to use Mass Dispel relics if you have them. Outside of those casters, Bloodfang raiders patrol around parts of the dungeon, and these guys just have an instant cast tank hit in Shred, so be aware that they will deal significantly more damage to the tank than regular mobs. They're often joined by Bloodfangs, and these guys have a similar Shred ability, but instead of hitting the tank, they will actually leap out at random players and use it on them, so be careful when pulling these guys with other mobs that deal group damage. Finally, we've got these Slaughtervine mobs, which initially lie dormant on the ground and won't actually aggro you unless someone runs directly over their flowers. These mobs don't have any abilities, instead they just have the Thorns passive, reflecting 10% of damage taken back at the attacker, which isn't a ton if you only have 1 or 2 of these mobs in a pull. Just be careful if you're pulling a lot of them. That brings us to routing, where I recommend pulling everything on the first couple platforms, and then when you're given the choice of going around to the left or right, head down the right path, pulling basically everything in your path as you make your way around to the opposite side of the circle, at which point you can hop down the cliff below, clear a couple more packs, and then head into the final boss encounter. Speaking of, let's talk about that, where in this instance, you'll be fighting 2 bosses at once, Drazhul, the Fleshbroker, and Slavetrader Brull. It's important that you damage these bosses as evenly as possible, as the higher health boss gains a stacking 2% damage increase for every 1% health it has over the other. When it comes to the actual abilities, let's start with Drazhul, who frequently uses Conjure's Scythe to throw a spinning projectile at a random player that continues to bounce around the room and will bleed anyone it touches, so make sure this gets pointed away from your group, and be careful to avoid it when it starts bouncing around. Outside of the scythes, Drazhul is the main form of group damage thanks to his Furious Tantrum channel, which functions the same as the gore-stained butcher mobs you encountered earlier, so having some things like healing cooldowns and group defenses for this can be quite useful. Last up, he has the Vortex ability, where he runs to the center of the room and begins to pull players in, dealing lethal damage to anyone who gets too close. This pull-in effect is extremely difficult to stay out of on your own, so instead you'll need to use the Wild Root Thorns to assist you. This is one of Brull's abilities, and it creates a large circle around a random player that then drops a vine puddle underneath them after a short delay. Initially, you want to make sure you avoid these vines as they deal ticking damage and slow anyone inside them, but when the vortex pull begins, your entire group will want to make sure they step into this to prevent the pull-in effect that it does. Since you need to use these and the middle of the room is lethal, I recommend dropping the puddles kind of halfway between the center of the room and the wall of the arena, as this maximizes the amount of safe space you have during Vortex, which can be quite important if one of those previously mentioned scythes sweeps across the room and cuts off part of your thorns. Also, keep in mind that during Vortex, the entire group will be taking a fair bit of damage since they're all taking the ticking damage from the thorns, so it's also not a bad time to have some sort of defensive or healing cooldown running. Outside of that, Brull has a couple different tank hits. First is Wild Bolt, which is interruptible, so you want to make sure you keep a kick rotation on that cast. On top of that, there's an uninterruptible tank hit in Creeping Decay, so you want to make sure you always have a defensive cooldown available for those hits. When Ver's Legacy is active, the boss also gains the Infernal Explosive Soak ability that the Desecrator mobs had, so make sure you keep an eye out for where these soaks spawn and have someone run into them to prevent any additional group damage. But there we have it, guys. Hopefully this guide was useful, and if it was, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Fellowship videos, including things like heroes and, of course, the rest of the dungeons. My name is Tactyks, signing off until next time. Good luck out there, fellows.